Welcome to another episode of the Dentology podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. So welcome to our latest episode of Dentology, the Business of Dentist podcast. And today we're joined by Justin Leigh. So Justin is the founder of Focus4growth. His specialty area is consultative selling and coaching leadership. He's the author of Inspire, Influence and Sell, of which I have a signed copy. Thank you, Justin. And he's soon to be released Inspire, Consult, Sell. Welcome, Justin. How are you doing?
Hey, Andy. Thank you very much. Hi, Andy. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Justin.
Really well.
Good to see
Thanks
you.
for inviting me.
Good.
Don't you love the word founder? You almost feel you should say it like founder rather than just like founder.
But it's funny, I'm reading the book called Grinding It Out at the moment, which is about Ray Kroc. And the film was called Founder, because he's the guy that he didn't it's a bit of a harsh title, because he didn't actually found McDonald's. It was the McDonald's brothers that found McDonald's, but he was the guy that turned it from being a 15-cent few outlet burger business to the conglomerate that it is today. The word founder's got.
Did you read it in your head as founder?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That deep meaning.
You visualised it.
Exactly. So just to kick us off, Justin, could you I'm always interested in people's pathways of how they got into dentistry. What was yours? How did you end up in dentistry?
I took the boomerang approach. So I was in dentistry, and then I left dentistry, and then I came back to dentistry. So 31 years ago, I trained as a dental technician.
What were you, 8 or 9?
I say he must have been like 8. I thought it was at school.
That means more to me than you can possibly realise.
Right, we can stop this now. Justin's got all his
Thank you very much, Justin. Lovely to see you.
That's it. Goodbye. Justin Leigh has left the building. So I was let straight out of school. So I was about 18, actually. But I qualified as a dental technician. I served 4.5 years with a laboratory that was part of a practice. So I saw kind of the clinical side of dentistry and the technical side. But at the end of that apprenticeship, I realised it wasn't a career I wanted to pursue any further than having had my qualification. So I ended up in dental sales. I was going to say I moved into dental sales. I stumbled into dental sales, and I started working for quite a large retail company who are still about today. They're based in Dundee in Scotland. And that was my first foray out of the lab into a sales environment where I was calling on dental practices, dental labs.
That's quite a move in itself, because I always have kind of dental labs. Back in the day when you were there, there'd have been lots of wax, and you were tucked away in a back room, and you weren't really exposed to the population So to go from that kind of world where you were tucked away in a room to go into sales, which is right at the front end, that's a massive shift in itself.
I bet you had to buy a suit.
I did. That was the first time I ever owned a suit, Chris. You're absolutely right.
A suit and a tie.
I bought my first grey suit.
Yeah, there you go.
I did, and it was interesting, actually. I don't think I gave it as much consideration as perhaps I should have done, because I literally went for an interview with the sales director and one of the sales managers for the company, and they sold me on the job. I think because I turned up in a suit and not my lab coat, I looked the part.
Covered in dust.
There was no dust. So he's the first guy that's come to interview without any dust on his shoulder.
He's got the job.
He's in. Check. And so I got this job working for Right Health Group, it was called at the time. Great company. I really enjoyed my time there. But what I recognised was that I was kind of just winging it. So I spent 18 months with Wrights, feeling a little bit like I was just winging every day. I wasn't quite sure what to do.
Is that imposter syndrome that Adele was talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, comparing me with Adele, I'll take that as well. It just gets better and better today. But I had 18 months, and by the end of it, I'd been relatively successful. I was running a good territory, had some great customers. People seemed to like me, but I always felt a little bit like I could do better and kind of do a bit more. So then I managed to get a job with Dentsply. And at the time, Dentsply, one of, if not the largest dental company in the world. I remember thinking, I remember seeing the portfolio and the products. And I wasn't with Dentsply very long, and they put me through a sales training program. And that training program it was a bit like someone turning on multiple light bulbs. It was like, this is how I can take a consistent approach to selling. Here's how I can engage customers more effectively. Here's how it works, really. And that was really transformational. So that enabled me to just perform at a higher level, be a better salesperson, manage relationships better. So everything kind of changed at that point. And I was with Dentsply for about 4 years. And then I was invited to go and work for 3M. So I joined 3M in 99. It's still in dentistry at this stage. And I was with 3M for a couple of years in their dental business. I ended up managing their channel and distributors. So I managed the distribution channel, and I managed some of their large corporate accounts, which kind of gave me a new perspective on selling to larger businesses, larger corporates, that kind of thing. And then in 2002, I moved out of dentistry into medical sales and became a sales manager. And that was when kind of things really shifted again, because I went from being a salesperson to being a sales leader, leader of a team. And I thought that, I thought I could just tell people what to do and they'd do it.
Yeah. They're not interchangeable, are they? No. Being a great salesman doesn't mean you're a great sales leader.
No, absolutely not. And it took me a little while to figure that out. And first couple of years, a bit like when I was first in sales, first couple of years was quite tough because the things I was doing weren't working, and I couldn't work out how had I been so successful there. Okay, it take a lot of effort and a lot of development, but how come it wasn't working as a sales manager? And then I went on a coaching course and a leadership development course, and learning how to take a coaching style of leadership, very much in the way I learned how to take a consultative way of selling. Once I got those two kind of skills and approaches perfected, actually everything changed. I recognized it wasn't about me, it was about the team. It was about how I help them to change from the inside out, not trying to push change from the outside in.
Did you enjoy it, Justin, before you kind of had this kind of revelation of how to do it and how to get better results? Were you still enjoying sales before, or was it something that frustrated you?
I tell you, I was highly anxious when if someone met me back then when I was first in sales and when I was first in leadership, you'd have kind of sensed that there was an anxiety about me. And it wasn't conscious. I wasn't aware. I don't know how aware I was of it. I was just trying to get through the situation, trying to kind of figure it out. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned. I work with a coach, and I work with other business partners and other leaders. And it's really interesting when you identify other people that have already kind of either walked the path that you're trying to walk on, or they've figured out something you haven't figured out, and they can show you the way. You go from feeling like you're just kind of scrabbling around in the dark to actually starting to put in place a plan that you're more confident is going to deliver what you need to deliver. Yeah, I think that's probably why I've ended up in running the business I'm running, doing what I'm doing, because one, I realized how tough it was kind of trying to figure it out myself. And two, once you've gained that experience and knowledge, actually, passing it on, sharing it with other people is really rewarding, because you can help other people get to the results they want much more quickly and much more effectively. So, so my career with 3M was, I went into business leadership after the sales leadership, and I ran multiple businesses for them, all outside of dentistry. And then in 2017, I left the corporate world and retrained as an executive coach. So I got a formal coaching qualification. And then in 2018, I set up Focus for Growth. And I started working with all sorts of different clients from my business network. But over the last 3-4 years since running the business, I've kind of become more and more attracted back into the dental market. And something like 80% of my clients now are either dental industry or dental practice groups. So it's quite a transition back into dentistry. But it's also one of those things that I had left it because of the requirement to leave it in 3M. But having come back, it's made me recognize just how much dentistry as a practice and as a profession really means to me, and how much I enjoy it. So I'm very, very pleased to be back.
Oh, interesting. I mean, it's what we've said to a number of people. I mean, it's a bit like, excuse the football analogy, and not a great one for me being a Gooner, and definitely not one for you being Man United, but it's a bit like Jurgen, isn't it? You know, Jurgen, I don't think he was a very good player, but he's a brilliant manager. He gets the best out of his team. Whereas someone like Ollie, who was a good player, has obviously not done so well with getting it out of the team. And I think the hardest thing, I think sometimes, is what you've done is to recognise that, rather than just keep trying to do the same old thing, because there's no point, is it? You might be a great salesman, but if you can't actually manage a team, you're never actually going to fulfill anything, because you're not selling directly. You're not managing and motivating your team. So you sort of set yourself up to fail, really.
But I think corporate structures lend themselves to that, because typically when you become a manager, a director, you tend to earn more money, and those people tend to manage people. And so you end up moving away from the bit that you're trained and skilled to do, because you're increasing in seniority, which means more money, more responsibility. But then you're doing a job you're not equipped and trained to do. And I guess the difference for you is you sort of sort out, courses and programs to support you in that growth. So you felt comfortable in those roles. But there's so many people out there that don't have that support and are doing roles in a leadership position or a management position where they were good at what they did. That led to their promotion, but that promotion leads to it puts you in an exposed position.
Did you source those courses yourself, Justin, or were they sort of put through 3M, or did you think, well, actually, no, I need to learn myself, so I'm going to go and hunt these things down?
A combination is the honest answer, Chris. So when I first joined Dentsply, I actually funded myself and sought an Institute of Management diploma. So I used to go to evening classes at a kind of community college, and I was there with all sorts of other people learning how to manage businesses, how to set expectations, how to deal with people, which actually was really enjoyable, because I funded that myself. It felt, I guess I was more committed to it, which was a good thing. But the sales training generally was funded by the organizations. Right. The coaching training was funded by 3M and the leadership development program. But then I qualified as an NLP practitioner in the mid 2000s, about 2005, 2006. Yeah, and I funded that myself, found that myself, because it was an interest for me. And the coach training that I did in 17, 18, I funded myself and found for myself. And even this year, I'm on an entrepreneur's business development program, kind of trying to figure out, how do you take a more structured, asset-driven approach to business beyond just, kind of tearing around like we all find ourselves doing from time to time. So it's quite interesting.
I tell you what's interesting, isn't it? Is that, to people who are listening to this, it's rare that you're successful just by being successful. It's a bit like, well, they've been a brilliant band or whatever it is. And the answer is they've been 5 years practicing to get to that point. I can remember, what's that? Is it Arnold Palmer with the more I practice, the luckier I get? Yeah. And I think that's just what you just said sort of sums it up, really, in the fact of you can always learn from someone else or something else to build your business and the way that you progress further. But it's, do people want to do that? And then they potentially get frustrated because they've never delivered to their true potential.
Yeah. And for you, Justin, sales, sadly, as soon as you say the word sales, people will conjure up in their mind a figment of what it means, isn't it? It's dodgy double glazing salespeople, it's car salespeople, trying to sell you a dodgy car. It's that through your experience, how have you seen the perception and the view of sales change over the years? Because my take is, I think within dentistry, I think kind of, it's no longer a dirty word. But roll back 10, 15 years. And if you mention the word sales in dentistry, there was a degree of people being affronted.
They move away from it.
Exactly. That was kind of unpleasant, almost distasteful. What's your take on it? Because you've obviously been at the sharp end of this world for decades.
Yeah, I still think. Yeah, I have. You're right.
Despite how you look.
Thank you for the caveat, Andy. I appreciate it. It's interesting. I still think, even today, there's a negative association with the word selling. Once you get down to selling, I'm a sales trainer. Even I kind of think, does it feel like selling? Do I want it to feel like selling? Here's the distinction for me. And we'll unpack some stuff here because I think it's really important. The first is to reimagine what it means to you. So for me personally, I even though I'm a sales trainer, I don't see myself as someone who teaches people to sell. I see myself as someone who teaches people to communicate more effectively and understand other people. Because in that understanding of other people, in that true ability to park yourself, understand the other person completely, really get into kind of their world, their problems, their challenges, their priorities, their situation. In that understanding comes your ability to influence. Until you truly understand the other person, you can't influence them because you're just throwing stuff at them that may or may not stick. And so this is something that isn't always inherent within sales training courses. So there are courses where it is more about, craft your pitch, learn to, use your words to shape and influence other people's thoughts and behaviors. And for me, there may be some value in that, but actually the most authentic route is to understand the other person, really kind of cultivate the skills it requires to build trust, get the person to open up, get them to tell you what they're really looking for, tell you what their greatest fears are. And from there, you can then genuinely say whether or not you can meet those needs and be honest about it. If you can't, then just say, do you know what? Actually, I think the best option is for you to look somewhere else, or let me point you to another service that might be more useful or valuable for you. And that creates even greater credibility.
I was going to say there's massive power and credibility by saying, I just don't think we're a good fit. I don't think I can help you with this.
Not 2 ears and 1 mouth. That's why you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Absolutely.
Listen more and speak less.
Yeah, but interestingly, Chris, that's not natural for us. When you look at the way the mind works, you look at how most of us think and feel about ourselves, we tend to default to our own position. Being selfless and switching from our own perspective to someone else's is quite an intention that we have to set to do that. Because most of the time we're more interested in ourselves. And, I've been guilty of that many times throughout my career and my life. And it takes a lot of conscious effort to switch the focus.
I'll tell you what's interesting, Justin. When it's sort of that fits really nicely. That sort of, do you remember, because we've obviously done loads of bank sales training and all that, lots of different people telling you lots of different things, sort of comes down to the same thing, but they do it in different styles. But I can remember that the role play, has now terrified people so much that now it's become a conversation rehearsal, I think was the last thing I heard. But actually that fits really well in the fact of, look, just talk to people and have a conversation. Don't assume. I think it's great.
You're absolutely right. And I'll tell you the other thing that happens is, as a natural consequence of that, if you can get yourself to think, actually, it's not selling, it's about understanding the other person and just checking whether or not I can help them. If I can, I'll offer some support. If I can't, I'll signpost them to the most appropriate resource or service. Right? When you change your perspective and think like that, it actually lowers the pressure. I don't feel like I've got to pitch someone or convert them or have a conversation.
You haven't got to get a sale.
Exactly. Yeah. I just reduce all of that, unconscious pressure that exists in the relationship, and actually things just get easier. But as well as that change in perspective, the other perspective is thinking about how I perceive myself and how I perceive selling to people generally. And if I can switch that focus to actually selling is understanding the other person and then understanding whether or not there's a fit, that makes me lean into the idea and the concept of selling. So I think of myself as someone who can do that, right? Because I want to understand what someone else wants and see if I'm a fit. And that psychological shift that I make enables me to then start take an approach that will be more based on the customer's or patient's needs, and to be able to follow a process and a structure that enables me to be more successful. So the two are interlinked, the way that we think about it and the way we approach it, and then how we feel about ourselves doing it. And when I work with teams, we running, whether it's sales training or coach training, one of the first areas we start with is mindset. we just get really clear on the kind of mindset that we need to have as we approach situations, whether that's with patients, whether it's with team members, whether it's with customers or partners. But actually thinking about how we manage ourselves first is really important, because that confidence that we bring is transmitted to the other party. So if we manage ourselves first and we build that self-confidence and self-belief, then other people are much more likely to buy into us. Whereas if we don't do that and we go in feeling a little bit wobbly or shaky, as I learned throughout my career, actually people kind of get this intuition, there's something not quite right about this. And you find yourself almost undermining your own ability to perform before you've even got started. So we have to start with mindset.
It's interesting. It's a life skill, isn't it, as well? It's not just a learning about selling stuff, but, you can get to understand who you are. I know we're getting potentially a bit deep, but the answer is it then puts everything else and frames it into perspective. Just a quick one. You mentioned NLP. Did you have negative, or do you get negative feelings? Because obviously NLP is sort of seen sometimes as almost like mind games, and you're playing with people by using words that turn them into automatons who will then sign up. Did you get any negative about doing the NLP? Because I think it's a fascinating area.
Yeah.
The only reason I didn't, Chris, is because they turned me into an automaton on the way in. So I was like, it all went. Because I did it. It was 2005 when I studied NLP. I think it was quite early in the cycle. It's 15, 16 years ago, and when I was doing it, it was quite, people like Paul McKenna had just started to come out as trainers, and there were some big names in the US running NLP trainings. I think I did it out of curiosity because I was interested. I was interested in understanding how, and I'd read up before I did the training. It was one of the things that I think I'd struggled a bit with, kind of managing myself in difficult situations, a bit of anxiety, a bit of self-confidence in certain situations. And I thought that NLP would be a way to help me understand how to manage myself better. And it was. And I mean, it's interesting because when you look at the structure of what NLP teaches you, it just basically, it shows that, the mind and the body are connected through the nervous system. So what we think in our minds, we feel in our bodies. And actually, it starts to help you manage yourself more effectively through the mind rather than the body. So you don't have to cope through other, perhaps more negative vehicles, alcohol or drugs or whatever. Actually, you can start to prime yourself on a regular basis through the thoughts that you have. You start to direct the mind and the thoughts, and it just changes how you think about yourself and what you're capable of in the world. And it takes some practice, and it's more like, the NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. What I've learned over the years, it's less about reprogramming, it's more about conditioning. So you can't just go, right, I'm going to go from that to that, because I've learned this principle. Actually, change takes a little more cultivating than that. So we might learn something and then we might have to practice quite a few times before we say, okay, I've made the transition from here to here. But I found it incredibly valuable, not only personally, but from, a client perspective, from a team leadership perspective, from a business management perspective. The principles are really solid. And if anybody's interested in it, I'd encourage you, look it up. It really can be impactful on you personally and professionally.
No, brilliant. Thanks, Justin.
Fascinating. And you what you talk about is kind of this blend of mentoring, coaching, and consulting when you kind of work with your clients. So from a team's point of view, how does that kind of come together? How does that kind of manifest itself in how those teams change the way they work? And what does it look like in a practice?
So it tends to be program-based. So we cover some key principles and structure that we know is going to make an impact on either a practice or a business team. And so normally that will be either in the direction of helping people have better consultative sales conversations, whether they be with patients or customers, or it'll be about how leaders make an improvement in the way that they lead teams. And that generally will lead to a coaching approach. But sometimes, people have some knowledge and experience, and it's just about helping them to see how they apply what they already know. because knowing something and doing something consistently are two different things, as we know, right? And when someone knows what to do but they're not doing it, generally speaking, they need coaching. Okay. Right. So if you know something and I start telling you again what you already know, you actually build up resistance to it. If I take a coaching approach that helps you unpack what you know, understand how to apply it more effectively, and then help you with accountability to apply and implement, you're much more likely to adopt it and adopt it sustainably. So that's kind of the coaching approach. There are times when, in whether it's in a leadership role or in a communications position, that actually we don't know the optimal way to do something. And when we don't know the optimal way to do something, we need to be shown. And so we're trained or mentored in the optimal approach. And so we go training or mentoring to teach people things they don't know and then coach them to implement. Okay. And then finally, there are situations where you in a busy practice or business, there'll be lots of things going on. And there's an approach that is kind of generating results, but actually what people find is they can't see like the most optimal or effective way to implement everything and stack it up. And that's where consulting is really valuable, because if you bring someone into a business who understands the business, understands the moving parts, can almost take an observer position, see what you can't see, and then say, if you were able to just join this piece up over here with this piece, or if this bit here that you do once in a while, if you did that consistently across all patients, all interactions, across all members of the teams, then you would get some results that would start to stack and scale. That consulting approach, to be able to take that kind of almost helicopter view of the business, be able to see what you can't see, point it out to you, and then offer some mentoring advice combined with some coaching from implementation, all of a sudden you get these kind of layers of value that start to improve performance. So we see, so that's kind of why there's those three approaches, because there isn't a one size fits all. But what we find is that people then become more aware. Awareness is the first step to change. Once they're more aware, they can start to become more intentional about the approach they take. And once that approach starts to work, by having some coaching and having some support to implement and gain consistency, then results just seem to improve. And as does the patient experience, practice growth just kind of starts to happen almost organically.
Do you find there's like, and I know everyone is different, is this sort of like an average time it takes for an influence to occur? Because I presume there must be some people who you rock up and basically the answer is they're never going to change. So you might as well just say, thanks very much, I'm off.
And the unteachables.
Yeah, is there a sort of an average that says, as long as I've got an open spirit and I've got a principle and the team, and I imagine there's some saboteurs within that team that you've sort of got to either convert or move on. Is there sort of an average time, or is it there's not really? It's just sort of like depends really. So practice.
It does depend on the person and the team. You're absolutely right, Chris. To be honest with you, anything less than 6 months, I think is incredibly ambitious. Change takes time. People need time to process it, work through the improvements that they're going to make, figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work, because not everything doesn't work every time for every customer. There's some figuring out and adjusting and improving along the way. So 6 to 12 months really is an ideal window. That would be my advice. And anybody who's taken on any significant change will probably be thinking, do you know what? To achieve something great within 6 months is very difficult. Get out to 6 to 12 months and actually you do start to see some real improvements.
And I think it's that thing you talk about. You want any change that comes through to be sustainable. You want it to be in your embedded behaviour, as opposed to, I've learned a trick. It works, and I'll just keep doing it. But that's the world we live in, isn't it? Everybody wants everything now. Yeah, everybody wants something quick. Well, there was a chapter in your book, your Inspire, Influence, Sell book, that I was drawn to, which is about rapport. Because within our business, we talk a lot about building rapport with clients, and it goes back to that: understand who they are. The more you understand about them. And we worked with a lady years ago, and she had this line that when she started talking to people, she said, "I'm curious," and then went on to say the thing that she was going to ask. Yeah. But rapport and curiosity, they're kind of one and the same, aren't they? If you're interested in people and you just keep asking questions, you're kind of building rapport, but you're doing it in a way where you're just learning so much.
Yeah. 100%, Andy. Yeah. It's really good insight that there's in the book. You'll note that I talk about rapport, and when I run programs with teams and businesses, we talk about rapport as like a first principle, and it's the first principle of influence, because rapport effectively connects us with somebody else, and until that connection happens, there's inherent resistance to take on board advice or to be coached or to be influenced. So we have to connect first. It's the first step. And I talk about rapport. There are 3 occasions when rapport happens. Okay, rapport happens when we experience one of 3 things. The first is that we experience that someone else is the same as us. If someone's the same as us, we'll naturally drift into rapport. Okay, and you'll notice it now in conversations you have with somebody. When you have a conversation with somebody early on, you'll notice there's a lot of, oh, I know that person, or, oh, I've done that, oh, I've been there, oh, I've had that. And what that is it's the mind trying to create a common connection. I want to be the same as you because then I'm in rapport, right? We do it so subconsciously and so naturally, we sometimes don't even realize. So I'm the same as you is a really quick and easy way to build rapport, but you can't always guarantee that you're the same as someone else, right? Because we're different. The second way that rapport happens is if I feel that I already have respect or admiration for somebody. It's why, social media influencers, celebrities get people that feel like they know them, because the minute I have that admiration for you, I'm immediately in rapport. I feel like I should connect. I feel like you should connect with me, and I'm kind of almost bowled over by the experience. But of course, none of us are celebrities yet, so we can't guarantee that either. And then the third experience that creates deep rapport is if I think you are interested in me, right? If I think you are interested in me, I will naturally develop rapport with you. And when you think about it, of those 3 that I've just described, they're the 3 ways in which we build rapport. There's only one of them that you can guarantee. And that is to be interested in someone else. So as leaders of practices, to be interested in our teams cultivates rapport, deepens relationships. As providers of clinical services to patients, the number one thing we can do to connect deeply with the patient is just start by being interested. How are you? How are you feeling at the moment? How are you finding things? How's life? A few simple questions will immediately establish and deepen rapport with your patients. And we should remember the power of doing that at every interaction. Every time we reconnect with someone, we should be reestablishing rapport, because that's the place where influence happens. No connection, no influence. And I mean influence in as positive a sense as possible.
And also I think it's surprising sometimes how quickly you can build rapport. People think it might take, minutes or hours or days, but sometimes, at least in practice, back to what you just said about if you feel you've got a connection with somebody on some level on something, rapport can come really fast. Very recently, the Duke of Edinburgh passed away, and there were lots of people talking about him and his life. And the journalist and presenter and writer Giles Brandreth spent lots of time with the Duke of Edinburgh, and he said whenever they went on official engagements together, obviously the Duke of Edinburgh met so many people, it was ridiculous. And he always said to people, so what's keeping you busy these days? And that was his way of not exposing whether he'd met the person before or not, because he couldn't remember whether he'd met. But Giles Brandreth said, in terms of building rapport, it immediately took you to a place where I'm interested in you, and it's now about you, not me. And he took that out as being such a sweet line of, I want to know about you and what's keeping you busy. But it also rounds off the issue of, I'm not quite sure if we've met before. But as a one-liner, I thought that is a really smart way of going about it.
That is, isn't it?
Just on sales, Justin, obviously this is your art in terms of what you do. And, Chris and I have this view that we're all in sales, every day. Whether it's getting kids to eat their dinner, get people to school on time, whatever it is, we're all in sales. What would you say are the 3 key ingredients to be good at sales?
So I think that's 3 key ingredients. So the first is the ability to park yourself and focus on the other person. Number one. If you can't do that, you're going to struggle. So park yourself, focus on the other person. The second then is to be able to listen and understand what you're told. Mm-hmm. And listening is a skill. And it's not a skill that many of us are taught. And so we have to be able to listen, because that will enable us to truly understand the other person. And then the third is to be able to connect the dots for people and be able to not only understand what you've heard, but then be able to match what it is you can provide, whether that be, dental services, whether it's referrals, whether it's, a team that supports the patient in the journey, but being able to then connect the dots with what you've heard from the patient so that you can, explain in a way that's compelling to them why they would choose to have, that treatment or service with your practice. So you've got, park yourself, think about the other person, listen deeply so that you can understand, and then connect the dots between what you offer and what they've told you they need. Those 3 things are incredibly powerful in selling.
I like the listen one. I think we say to some our guys, there's a difference between listening and hearing. You can, if you can, unless you really hear what that person's saying, you're just listening.
And I suppose the great thing is these are kind of fairly primeval skills. They just need honing. Yes. Anyone can do it. Because, I think lots of people are scared of sales, fearful of it. And I'm not sure whether people are actually scared of sales or whether their fear is failure and rejection. I think with a lot of people, it's actually understanding what it is they're being asked to do and being equipped to do it. I don't think it's actually sales that scares people. I think it's that kind of rejection or not being successful.
And also they've just been told to do it. And I think that's what you're saying, Justin, is quite right. You've got to get people sort of engaged with the process. I mean, I love it when you go and buy something and some guy goes through a sales script. And it's like, you're going to ask me now if I'd like the added warranty. Because that's probably point 4 on your list.
Here it comes.
And then, no thanks, they go, all right. It's just like, it always makes me giggle because obviously when we did all our training, there's a process and there's a structure and all that sort of stuff. But obviously they've got some poor kid in Currys who they haven't really done any training at all, but they've given him a list. These are things you need to ask. And if you can't remember it, just have it under the desk. So you can occasionally lean back and see what questions.
That's the worst end of sales, isn't it? And that's where it gets the bad name. So we've already been treated. Your Inspire, Influence, Sell book is already out, Amazon bestseller, and you've got your Inspire, Consult, Sell coming out soon. Is there a date when that's going to be available for people?
I'm aiming for the 1st of January or 2nd of January. Probably I won't be doing it on New Year's Day. I've basically taken that book, Andy, and thank you for reading Inspire, Influence, Sell. I'm really pleased with your feedback. And you've also seen, I'm sure I'm allowed to say this, you've seen an early copy of Inspire, Consult, Sell, because you very kindly read it for me and provided me with a praise quote, Andy, so I really appreciate that. But it's due, so it will be done by the end of the year. I probably won't launch until early Jan. Sure. But effectively, I've taken the structure and principles from Inspire, Influence, Sell and tailored it for dental professionals. So dentists, orthodontists, implantologists, anybody who's a specialist dentist or a TCO, anybody who's having those conversations with the patient. And they want to, take a more structured approach to a consultative sales conversation. And it's early feedback from people who have read it has been really exceptional. The way it works is similar to the book, the original Inspire, Influence, Sell book. So there will be the book, there'll be a program, there'll be a scorecard actually that's live at the moment. So if anybody is interested in their own, is kind of testing their ability to have those consultative conversations, I'll send you a link afterwards. We can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's a free assessment. So basically you click on the link. It's called the Patient Experience Scorecard. It gives you 36 assessment statements that you can then rank yourself against. And at the end of that, you'll get a summary report that tells you how you fared. You get a percentage score in 5 key areas, and that scorecard report then becomes something that you can use to guide your personal development when it comes to, you know, consultative communication.
That's really cool.
It's a really nice tool, actually, and it just kind of gives people some options. If somebody wants to read the book, get a bit of direction, figure it out for themselves, as I spent, you know, many years in my career doing, absolutely, you know, it's a series of resources where you can do that for yourself. If somebody wants to take a more structured approach, wants to come on a program, then there's options to do that as well. So we try and really think about, you know, if someone wants to do it themselves, they can. Somebody wants an online program, there's that option. Somebody wants to work more closely with me, you know, as a group, then they've got the option to do that as well. So we kind of give them layers of options.
Now if you could let us have the link, we'll definitely drop that in the notes so that it'll appear on the podcast. Because I think with scorecards, it's great, especially if you've been doing something for a while, because you might know that you're having a degree of success, but you don't quite know why. You don't know the bits you're good at.
It just happened.
Yeah, and also the bits that you're not good at, but by making a few small tweaks, you might go from being great to amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, no, that's great.
That's the idea.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you, Justin. It's been really useful. I've learned loads. It's been enlightening. It's been a very, very great chat. We always finish up in the same way. We always ask our guests two questions at the end. So the first one we always ask is, if you could be a fly on the wall in a certain situation, what would that situation be? What would you like to look down on and observe a situation that's unfolding before you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know. Have you been watching episodes of The Crown?
Yes,
on Netflix. I've been watching. My wife and I, we've watched it. We've binge watched it from end to end, and love it. And one of the things that actually kind of really made me smile was the Queen's conversations with the Prime Minister on a weekly basis. And I must admit, I was curious when Boris Johnson got in as Prime Minister. I was thinking, I wonder what the Queen thinks, having to meet with him on a weekly basis. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall in that first meeting with the Queen and the bumbling Boris Johnson, because I can just imagine the awkwardness.
Would she reach over and do his hair?
Yeah. Smooth it down.
For goodness sake, Boris, come on.
Put a bit of gel in it.
Sort yourself out.
That would be good. That would be a really good one. And then our follow-up is, if you could meet somebody, if you could sit down and have dinner with somebody, who would that be? They could be still with us, somebody from the past, you know, real fictional, whatever takes your fancy.
I'll tell you someone who fascinates me for a number of reasons. I would love to sit down and have dinner with Martin Luther King. I heard something recently that apparently on the morning of the I Have a Dream speech, Martin Luther King was in front of this huge crowd, huge audience, and actually the presentation he was giving wasn't going down very well. People were kind of going, you know, what's he trying to say? We're not really sure that this is kind of connecting with us. And then someone in the audience who was one of his supporters and had followed him in the thousands of sermons he'd given across, thousands of churches across the US, was shouting from the crowd, "Tell them the dream, Martin. Do the dream speech. Do the dream speech." And he never planned to do it. But it was a speech that he'd given like over 1,000 times across lots of churches across the US. And then he started with "I Have a Dream." And because it was so personal to him and so powerful a connection to what he really stood for, the speech unfolded and the rest was history. And it was just the perseverance and tenacity that he went through to get to that point. It's a bit like you said earlier, Andy, you know, all these people that you see as successful and you think they've just turned up and God, where did they come from? Yeah. They've done tens of thousands of rehearsals, of hours. They've refined their craft. They know their art. And actually, you know, it's that perseverance that keeps you going until you make it. So, you know, that came to me recently. I thought I'd love to have had that conversation.
But how ironic that that's possibly one of the most well-remembered speeches in history.
Exactly.
And it nearly didn't happen because he nearly did something that he thought was going to be more interesting. But when he defaulted back, I think the other two things that stand out for me from that speech is it was in the 1960s. And we talk about influence and influencers as today. You know, there was no social media, there was no sophisticated communications network. Yet over 250,000 people turned up on that day to listen to what he had to say. They didn't even know what he was going to say, but 250,000 people turned up in the 1960s just to listen to somebody speak. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Be interested to know and how many people of the younger generation would know about Martin Luther King and I Have a Dream.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, perhaps it might be a generational thing. It would be a shame if it does get lost.
It'd just be interesting if you said to people, Martin Luther King, they probably might have a recollection or might go, oh, yeah, I don't know. It's just fascinating how we're of a similar decade-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was a very, very powerful moment. Yeah.
But no, that would be a great person to sit down with. Justin, we appreciate your time. I know you're incredibly busy. That's been an absolutely blinding episode. I've really enjoyed your company. It's been a lovely morning.
Thank you. I've loved speaking with you guys as well, especially the constant flattery throughout the conversation. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
So you can go back to school now.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks,
lovely.
Chris.
Cheers. What a lovely chat with Justin this morning. Really nice guy.
Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it? Yeah. As you said, and it's interesting that he still feels that sales is a dirty word. It's like, we don't sell, but you do sell.
But when he kind of talks about, it's about understanding yourself, taking the other person's point of view, listening. It's not bad stuff, and done well. You should be able to get to a stage where you can make a recommendation that will better that person's life.
Yeah.
In some way or other, they're going to be better off as a result of the thing you have. But I also like the bit where he said, but you may not have the right thing for them. It may not be a good fit. Yeah. So you might signpost them somewhere else. And he said for him, that made him feel less pressurized when he's talking to people, because it means you don't have to make a sale.
I think it's super powerful, isn't it? I know that we do it with people who want a valuation order, and we just say to them, not really too sure you do need a valuation. Yeah. You need to do something else first before you do that, because you're just having a bad moment. I thought it was brilliant. I thought the bit about rapport was good as well.
Yes, yeah. And it's that thing, it's curiosity, isn't it? And if you can build rapport with somebody, you have a connection. And then when you then start talking about the thing that you want to talk about, there's that heightened level of trust before you get to the thing.
I'm interested, I think was for me, we've always told our guys, haven't we, that part of probably where we are successful is that we are genuinely interested in our clients.
Yeah.
Whatever they're going to do, we're just interested to know what they're going to do, rather than a false interest or trying to elicit a response to get a sale. Yeah, you're actually just genuinely interested.
No, I think the listeners are going to take loads from that one. It was a
brilliant, good fun doing it. Good, nice guy.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing, and also follow us on Instagram.